Hello, good evening, and welcome to the CG Pro webinar, Unreal for Filmmakers. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Um, I'm just going to go ahead and jump straight in. So, who am I and why are you here listening to me? My name is Ed Dawson-Taylor. I am an Unreal authorized instructor. I've been in the world of CG for about 15 years. Before that, I was a software engineer. I've worked in a lot of different types of CG, from commercials, movies, real time, virtual production. I've worked at some really cool studios like ILM and MPC, DD, and worked on some really great projects. Some of them being quite pioneering in the world of virtual production, such as The Lion King, where I was the VAD lead, Jungle Book, and I continue to be an artist, supervisor, teacher, mentor. I also still develop, still innovate and create new technology. Yeah, also founder of CG Pro, and I've taught for quite a while with John Hughes Institute and One Academy, variety of subjects from lighting to Houdini and lots of Unreal lately. So yeah, my journey into virtual production was really entering in the Jungle Book phase and then developing it through that and through Lion King, and worked in Unreal for around 5-6 years professionally and continue to do so. And so this webinar today is going to be about using Unreal for filmmaking and what is being described as virtual production these days. So yeah, just as a quick note, I'm going to go through about 40 minutes of content here, and there will be an offer at the end of it if anybody is interested, just to kind of get that out of the way. I don't want to be in any nasty surprises at the end. There will be a paid offer at the end, so just to let you know that. But yeah, just a quick note at the beginning on virtual production, what it is. It's a hot topic at the moment, and I just wanted to kind of step into that, maybe demystify it slightly for anyone who isn't quite sure what it is. So, um, yeah, just a little bit of who this is for first, and who might be interested in VP, virtual production, and who might be interested in listening to the rest of this webinar. So yeah, VFX artists in support of virtual production or in transition into virtual production, interested in joining the world of virtual production, from animators, environment artists, character artists, all the traditional visual effects artists are welcome in virtual production. And also filmmakers who may be interested in virtual production for actually making movies or making content, but also for a number of other modes of virtual production, which I'll step through in a second. So whether they may be producers, directors of photography, directors, production designers, animation supervisors, big budget, small budget, indie, yeah, so filmmakers. Virtual production professionals, which are growing, but still quite a rare breed, very highly in demand. So it's a fantastic time to have these skills because lots of opportunity out there, not so many people actually doing this stuff yet. So those people would be, virtual production professionals would be some on-set variety from the previous production professionals I just mentioned, tech artists and operators, people using this equipment to help the filmmakers, people behind the scenes supporting with the art and adjusting it and adapting it, then virtual art departments and animation helping to kind of craft these worlds, and then support them whilst they're going on into a shoot. Then, yeah, adjacent industries that might also be interested in this, from the world of live events, speakers, conferences, and people in education. So, yeah, all of those people. And what is virtual production? So, uh, it is a broad umbrella term, probably is going to become just production at some point. The virtual part of it is really hinting at the kind of use of real-time engines. This is an upgrade of technologies that have been around for really 100 years, from rear projection and moving through all kinds of trickery into the present day. But virtual production is kind of an umbrella for lots of different modes, and I'm going to go through some of those modes here before we get going. So yeah, really, it's kind of using a bunch of different technologies, from mocap, real-time engines, other bits of software to aid in production, pre-production, final production. So now, example here from The Lion King, really what we were doing there is doing a previs and getting a lot of virtual camera, so we could actually shoot, the filmmakers could shoot real camera in a virtual environment that was all completely CG. Previs has been around for a long time. That's a way of making a rough version of a movie before you go and spend all the big money. So yeah, there's all of these tools and techniques are very, very, very good at upgrading the previs process. Post-viz, being able to combine live action footage with previs, like we did on the Jungle Book, essentially. And there was a mix of kind of full CG and post-viz type integrated previs. Tech viz, which would be planning a shoot, whether it's a virtual production shoot or a real shoot. You can use the game engine to virtualize, make a simulated version of where you're going to actually do something practically in the real world, and you can use this engine, figure out all your problems up front, and then work out, does your equipment fit, are you going about this kind of thing the right way, save yourself tons of money, and making lots of expensive mistakes on set. And then production, actually making things which in camera visual effects or green screen, but actually using it to get hopefully capture final imagery in camera, some stuff you might have seen in projects like The Mandalorian, that kind of thing, trying to capture it in camera. So a few flavors of virtual production. What do you need to do it? Depends how big you're going. Minimum version, you can do it by yourself at home with a single machine and maybe a little bit of extra kit, which I'll get into a bit. You might use something like this, a 5 controller and some kind of mount, just to be able to get realistic camera motion. Instead of animating it, you can actually use something physical, but minimal amount of investment. You could use an iPad or a Vive and your own machine just yourself. As long as you've got a good idea, you can do it all by yourself at home. Or you could spend millions and millions of dollars and do it on the big stage. Really, it just depends what you want to do, how much money you got. Software, again, you don't really need very much. Unreal Engine can do most of this stuff vanilla. It's free. So, really with a few $1,000s for a bit of hardware and a free piece of software, you can do all of this. The more fancy you get, the more you can spend, the bigger kinds of things you can accomplish. So you also need some skills. You need some people. If you're going to do something a bit bigger, you might need some artists and operators and production crew and producers, people who are savvy in these new ways. And then you obviously need this thing you always need, which is time and money, and being able to afford to be able to focus on this for a while. So that's just to say, you can get going with relatively little, almost nothing, or you can go crazy and spend lots of money. But you don't need to. You can. This is very applicable to indie and sole operators. So, challenge: how do you do all of this? Well, I'm going to go through now a presentation of the concept of doing this inside Unreal Engine. And then a bit later on, I'll talk about some more options for how you can take it further. So, yeah, let's get going. So I'm going to go through a little bit of an outline of Unreal Engine, how to look at it in terms of filmmaking. What is it? Unreal's a game engine that became a filmmaking tool. That said, it still feels like a game engine sometimes, but it's got lots of tools that have been retrofitted to make it really good at filmmaking that's ever evolving. Um, Currently, it's mostly an organizer of content, world building and layout tool, renderer, and a real time renderer, or not, or an offline renderer. Um, it's has a timeline so you can make things move. It's an interactive programming tool, so you can actually use that, go all the way into making a game, or you can automate some of the processes that you may normally do manually and save yourself some time. And as some people are doing now, you can develop the two in tandem with actually the same assets. So you could make a game and a movie at the same time with the same stuff. An early sort of compositor of sorts, although you may still want to use traditional compositing, but it's possible. What it's not so much is a tool to create custom assets, bespoke assets, characters, models, texturing, that kind of stuff. That tends to be in DCC software. There's a great piece of software called Blender that's also free, so you can get going and learn that as well and make your own stuff, or you can leverage and download tons of stuff these days without having to make it. It is growing as something to be able to generate more original content, getting some modeling capability, some rigging capability, but still early days there. Mostly that's done outside. So we've got Unreal Engine, which is the software that's running on your machine. You underneath that Unreal Engine is housing a project, and that project consists of files. Those files live on your hard drive. Those files can be versioned and kept secure and shared using version control, which you can use several varieties of it. My favorite is Perforce, and Perforce's tools, I should say, Helix. Um, you can download tons of stuff without having to make it yourself. As what is amazing right now is that you can learn this system in a couple of months, might be really productive, whether you're a filmmaker that's never touched this before or a visual effects artist that has got some experience. You can really get going in a couple of months. You can download tons of great environment art and use that. You don't have to make everything yourself. Um, you can build up a library of assets, pump them through Unreal Engine. It will then make them into its own assets and store those in the project. And those assets can come from Quixel Megascans, which is 15,000 or so amazing photogrammetry assets, all sorts of other downloads from the internet. As I said, you can build your own stuff. All of that will feed through Unreal. It will process it and consume it and turn it into stuff that it understands. So, yeah, moving that said, now we've got some understanding of what Unreal is. We're into pre-production. I'm going to try and base this a little bit on the traditional understanding of the stages of filmmaking. So going through pre-production, the planning phase. At the beginning of that, you would have story, you would have some kind of script, you would have maybe some storyboards, you maybe get engage an art department and start building your world, your visual world with concept art and reference, and maybe starting to get into some 3D, whether that's sculpting real objects or digital objects. But yeah, gathering your visual reference in your world. In the tech side of it, virtual production, you would be working with people that understand how all of this works and really thinking about what's your specific problem? What is the thing that you are trying to solve? There are many flavors of virtual production, as I said. It's not all about the Mandalorian. You don't have to force yourself down that road. Think about what you're going to benefit from the most. It could be that it's just the previs part. It could be that it's all the way up through in-camera visual effects. But talking to some people that understand it, a good savvy producer who knows this space, good virtual production supervisor, those kinds of people will help you um, get your idea down into practical steps. So yeah, just thinking about that ahead of time, and what's your budget, what can you do, what's needed, and what can you afford. that is going to help you make a plan of how to execute. And um, the next phase that we would get into, now we've got that down, we've got some visual understanding, we've got our piece broken out into maybe a timeline and some art and some visual references. Now is a great time to jump into Unreal. So you can really start to play with Unreal and start exploring the idea of your world or worlds, because probably if you're making a longer piece, it's going to be a bunch of different environments. So the beginning of this phase, you're going to have, if you're building a world, you want to have some reference up. You want to keep this reference up with in front of you all the time. Make sure that you're always looking at it. It's always preferably printed out and stuck on the wall so that you're just constantly kind of, it's washing over you. You're thinking about it a lot and being able to see it a lot. So the beginning of making the scene, yeah, have your reference up. We're then going to go through this process, which I'll jump into Unreal in a second, and show of blocking out your environment. And there's a very particular way that I like to do this. It's using literally blocks. The main reason for two main reasons for that is that they're very flexible. It's very easy to start getting a sense of scale and space and shape, but you're not bogged down with the prettiness of it. You're not consumed by the detail of it. It's a problem with a lot of us artists who like start getting into making things that you really zone in on the little details and spend too much time on that. So really, we're talking about blocking at this phase, and we're talking about really blocking out your environment, blocking out your light, blocking out your action, blocking out your cameras. And this is all to get some sense of the scale and dimension of your piece. So we're looking at this reference here. We then want to end up with something just really super rough like this. This is using just really rough shapes so you can just jump in really quickly and start to get some idea of the layout and being able to get cameras in there. So I'm just going to pull up Unreal for a second. So here is a scene. This is kind of the end result of this scene. This was put together by Shannon Thomas, who's actually a student that has been with us, is a good friend and studied with us as well. Did a fantastic job here of taking this simple idea, this simple blocked version of a park and a path and some trees going down either side of it, and turned it into something really beautiful. So the beginning version of this, jumping into Unreal here, we can see that this is the list, the outliner here of all of the objects in our scene. So this is the manifest, effectively, what's all the objects that are in your world. We've also got it broken out into these levels here. So it's a way that people like to organize their scenes and break up objects into various parts so they can, for one reason, organize them well. Another reason is to be able to collaborate with others. If somebody's working on a set of things, they can work on a level, because these levels right here are actually files that live on disk. So if you're working on a chunk of stuff, you can check that out. Going back to this idea of perforce and being able to uh, revision control, use revision control to collaborate, we can actually connect to this thing called perforce. So uh, if you were connecting, you would see this connection mechanism at the top here. You would connect to your particular vision control, whether that's on your local system or on AWS. This was actually created in Perforce that's running on AWS in the cloud, that allows remote artists to be able to work wherever they want. They can work on their files locally, and then when they make a change, they can then submit them back up into the cloud and be done. It's a very affordable way of doing it. No, it should be in the sort of tens of dollars per month to be able to work in that kind of way, but it totally frees you up to be able to work completely remotely and collaborate and work on the same stuff So we break things down into these levels to be able to organize your objects in your scene. I have this one hidden at the moment, this park blocking level. This is the one that contains the rough version that I would have begun with. So if I hide the pretty one, really this rough version that we've got right here, this is what you might start with. So it's just basic cubes, just to get a real kind of easy sense of the environment, the space, the scale, and we just simply make those from this place actors section over here. You have a very simple mechanism to be able to get very simple shapes in here. You can drag in these cubes, you can start scaling them and manipulating them, scaling them and rotating them, push them into whatever position you want. Um, the thing I like about doing this, as I said, is it's just super basic. You know, if you went in and you're actually modeling some of these things, you'd spend tons of time on all these little fiddly bits, and then if you wanted to change them, you've got lots and lots of things to change. In this sense, it's a tiny bit abstract, but very simple, very easy to manipulate. And the cool thing with these blocks is that you can scale them up and down. Very simple way of just laying out some simple shapes. But you can also get some measurements from this if you want to measure out your set. Say you know that your path here is a certain width. You can use this block. I know that when I bring this cube in, it's a meter. So if I scale this up like that to be the width of this path, this number down here in the transform says 11. That means that that is now, or nearly 12. That's like 12 meters wide. So and the scale is very important in Unreal. It's all based in centimeters. It's most really important to stick with that and not do what people do in other DCCs, which is to kind of work on whatever scale they want. Within Unreal, lots of things depend on it. You also want, when you bring things in, for them to make sense, but also physics and lighting and all kinds of other things that really depend on you using correct scale. So yeah, that's another great little trick, is you can use these little cubes and blocks to be able to measure out your world, make sure it's the right size. So now you've got this rough layout here. I'm not going to take the time to do that, but it was very simply done just by, as I said, dragging these shapes in here. If you wanted a reference for a character, I can bring in. So I've got the third person content loaded right here. I can bring in one of these mannequins. This comes with this lovely little robot mannequin that you can place. It's a human sized characters, a male and female one. It's really nice to be able to kind of drop these in, put these in the scene. Maybe place this one behind here if this one's going to be sort of serving behind this ice cream cart or whatever. And then you can start pulling cameras in, so you can rough in your light. We've got some light coming from up here. If I jump back into this section here, into the outliner, we have our lighting folder here. This is, as you notice, this is a very organized scene. That's a very important thing to do, because you end up with hundreds of things in here. You should make sure that you name all of those things well. So I've got a little bit of work I did here, which I haven't tidied up yet. So I would then make sure I put that back into my blocking folder. Then you can very easily show and hide these little bits in the world outliner. But as I said, I've got them grouped by level as well, so I can also show and hide them like that. So that's the advantage. Another advantage of having it already organized like this is that you can do those kinds of things very easily, not hunting around here for a little object here and an object there. It's all nicely put together, and very important when you work with others as well, to make sure that the collaboration side of it is pleasant and efficient. So yeah, so now we've got our blocking shape. We've got some light in here, just simply by dragging in some of these lights. Depending on what your environment's like, you might be dragging in, like in this case, we're outdoors, so We're going to have a nice old directional light that's going to mimic the sun coming in with these nice sharp shadows that you can see on the ground there. So we can very quickly start to get a sense of where the light's coming from, how that would behave on these objects, whether that's okay to be backlit, or would we want to bring the sun back around. So, as a quick example of that, with my little sun here, I can rotate this around. There's a little manipulator here. I can choose to be in world or local space, just to make the rotation a little easier. I'm going to do that in world space. So maybe we decide, yeah, I prefer it a bit like that. So the front of that character's a little more lit. I'm just going to go back to where it was for now, but that's the exploration of lighting. You can bring in additional light, obviously, if you need it. We have also an HDR backdrop in here, which is a great light that actually comes with a skylight and a piece of geometry, so you can actually see the background and experience the light at the same time. And we got ray tracing on in this, so the shadows are ray traced. You can see a little bit of the sort of noise that resolves from the fact that the ray tracing's on in there. But yeah, the ray tracing is on. Just need to make sure you got the right hardware to benefit from that. We'll talk about a little bit about in the advanced feature section in a bit about some cool things to know about the slightly more technical side of that. But essentially, you want some of this light in there. So you want directional light and probably an HDRI backdrop. And with those two things, you've then got the ability to have a strong directional light like a sun, and also some ambient light coming from an HDR. In addition to that, we're also going to have a post-process volume. One of the things that people don't often get in Unreal is that you want to have real lighting setup. So that's something which we'll we talk about more later on. I think this scene actually at the moment doesn't have that set up, but what you really do want to make sure in the second scene I'll show you in a second, make sure that you've got a level lighting set up, that your baseline has got no exposure compensation in it. I'll show you that in the next level, but this post-process volume will allow you to kind of bring that light down to a level where the cameras will make sense, so that when you open up apertures and things like that, it will actually make more sense to a person that understands cameras, a filmmaker, somebody that's used to thinking in f-stops. So yeah, talking about light and post-process, now we're going to drop in a camera. So at this point, we might start to do a scout. So we would, in this rough blocking stage, maybe we would bring in a camera. So I'm going to drag in a cine camera actor. Now you can see I've got my little widget there that represents the camera. So I can move this camera around as a maybe a DP or somebody who's used to framing up shots. They would go in and move this camera into the place where they want it to, frame it up, and should be in local space there for rotating that more nicely. But yeah, you would frame up your cameras. Maybe you'd make a bunch of these. Maybe you'd start getting into the level sequence to be able to start joining your shots together. But really, you're talking about, at this point, going back to the pre-production phase, looking at your boards, and now starting to place cameras in there, and starting to place placeholders for your action, starting to place these rough shapes in there. And what that go and play now. You've got very, very little to change here and manipulate. So it's super simple. It's really easy to play at this stage. It may be slightly abstract, the things that you're looking at, but you would go through this staged approach of starting to understand the space. Is this enough room? Are these things far enough apart? Can you start to simply put your world together like this and then make some decisions here and say, okay, yeah, this is about the right idea, I think. Let's do a little bit more work, plus it up a little bit more, and then we'll come back and do another scout. And your scout could be as simple as just looking through the viewport and doing this and moving this camera around, and then maybe calling this camera shot one, something like that. So that that could be the way you'd want to do it, or you might actually want to use a real camera. You may want to jump in VR at this point and have everybody remote into this session. There's a really cool thing that we do in level 2, where we go through remote session sync and have everybody join in a remote session, so you can actually connect in and be in this world together and actually move things around and make decisions. But at this point, maybe uh, just to keep it simple, you'd go around and lay out some cameras, or you might want to start using VCam. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. But essentially, I've got live link up here. This is streaming in a Vive signal from Steam, and what that is giving me is the ability to use this Vive controller to now be able to move this camera around, and I can use this. I can record the moves, or I can simply just frame this up. I turn that around, look at the bridge up there. I can use that to kind of frame this up. If that's a little hard to see, I can always hop into that camera with the bigger viewport. So there, you can start to explore your world. You can start to use a real physical camera that the filmmaker could actually hold themselves, and not just puppeteer through the viewport. So that's a pretty cool thing to do at this stage. I'm gonna eject from there so I can just zoom around again. But yeah, it's pretty simple to get that set up. You just have live link, you have Steam connected. You can add live link XR source, check these things on, hit add, and then it should give you XR live link streaming, should say receiving, and then you'll see these however many controllers you have. You might have some trackers and head-mounted display and a controller. You're then going to come add a camera to your scene. So you're going to pull one of these cameras in to the scene like this. You need to add a live link component controller to it. So that's very simply done by choosing add component and typing in live, choose the live link controller right here, and it will add this component controller. Then you can choose the controller. It's going to give you these tracked items from Steam. You can pick one that's actually going to control the camera for you, and then that's about it. In addition to that, you can also use take recorder. I may as well show this now. So you can use this cool tool, take recorder. It's appeared on a different monitor. So yeah, I've got my object preloaded, but I would basically drag whatever I want to record into this tape recorder, into there, like that, and just make sure this is still moving. So I can see that, no, I'm not trying to get any Academy Awards here, so don't judge me. But yeah, just getting some movement in there. Now I can hit record. It's going to tick down to 0. And then now we'll see, I'm just going to do a little pan, raise the camera up and down, a bit like that, and then I'll hit stop. And that has actually recorded a take. This again, down again. That has actually recorded a take. This ends up living in cinematics, in takes. I can now see these takes if I open up the level sequence that was recorded. Now you can see that my camera here is the one that I just recorded. Again, Obviously, not winning any awards for my camera work, but um, pretty cool. I just recorded that very quickly. This isn't like something that takes a whole anything more than I've just shown you to get that set up. It's pretty straightforward to do. So not something to be afraid of, but something to enjoy and have fun with. And as a filmmaker, sometimes I think it can be quite challenging or frustrating to sit with somebody who does know the software and communicate with them and tell them what you want. It's much nicer in a lot of ways to grab a piece of equipment and move it around and do what you want to do. So that's where this is really becoming exciting, is opening up this all these possibilities to people who traditionally were not able to get on the box and actually do this themselves. This is really not that hard. Um, so yeah. Anyway, there's a how we would kind of scout in a couple of different ways, and we'd have all the right people in here. We'd have the art director, our production designer, and director, and maybe animation supervisor if you're on a big production, or just yourself, with a bunch of different hats. Put each hat on in turn. Say, okay, I'm director now. Is this telling the story? Or I'm DP. Is this camera angle look good? Do I want it more dramatic or whatever it is? Making those decisions, being able to move on very quickly and easily. That's the whole point of this stage. Really, it's just quick, easy, fast iteration. A bit like the sort of engineering approach to innovating things. Where before in filmmaking, this was really time consuming. The iteration speed and expense of iteration was so huge that it was quite hard to iterate quickly and expensive to do so and prohibitive. So this is really just making a lot of this stuff a lot easier. And as a filmmaker, you can legitimately use this at home, explore your ideas, put some objects in there, sketch out your idea, record it, and then give that back to your team, and without having to talk about the idea, get them to do it, get some notes back, have them misunderstand the notes. The process of rapid iteration there is just uh, tremendously freeing, I think. Cool. So yeah, we just skipped back a couple of steps there, but went through blocking and scouting. Then obviously we'd move on to finessing. So really, that is going through your scene for each one of these objects, which we just put in cube form, thinking about what's the biggest win in this scene. Now, at the moment, the sky is obviously a big one. Getting something in for that. This path is huge, so getting something in there for that is going to get you big parts of screen space done. Some of these bigger objects. Um, so you're really step by step going in. The first stage to that might be just a rough upgrade, just so you've got something that's a bit nicer to look at. You might make some rougher assets and then go in and swap them out for finessed assets by the end. And you might have your artists working in parallel, working on the ultra high res final assets, but get them to do a rough one first and just get it moving around and being useful, and figure out, is it even needed? Do you need to spend all that time making a lovely, pretty, nice finished version of it? Or is it like, oh, we've got it in, actually we don't need that at all, we're going to look over this way, you don't have to do all that work. That's what used to happen a lot. So you would get in, you'd either be stuck because you can't afford to change your mind, or you would, yeah, just have spent all that money and have to spend it all again. So just so many advantages to doing it this way and being able to get in really quickly. Then next version of it, yeah, slightly upgraded. Then do another scout. Next version, um, you would end up with something like that. So all our blocks, we've had artists working on these and making nice finished versions of these, and then we would at that point be talking about possibly moving on. So I'm just going to simulate having got to this point, and then maybe we'll pick up our camera again. So yeah, so now you can see you can look around in this environment with your virtual camera. It's a whole different story now. I'm just going to pop that into the main viewport. So yeah, looking at the nice, much prettier version of the scene. Obviously, the filmmaker's going to be a lot happier working in this kind of mode. But yeah, hopefully still able to work in those kind of rougher modes. And then now you're in here, now you're doing sort of final sign off, making sure that last little tweaks are good, um, and then being able to move on. Oh, okay. So yeah, so we've got our set, our environment. Um, One easy way as well of doing action um, in without having to animate. If you know that this character is going to be uh, moving around. Sorry, I just was in a different. That person was in a different level. So let me just hide that again. Um, yeah, one useful way of being able to. Um, okay, I'm just going to move this one into this level. Um, so you can choose which level you put things into, and you can move things around. I'm just going to quickly do that with one of these uh, mannequins. So we'll just go to level and move selection to current level. Now I should be able to hide my blocking stuff again. And yeah, so if I wanted to move these things around without actually animating them, I can just simply duplicate them. Use this technique with chess pieces a lot, being able to just simulate where a character would be going without having to go through the process of actually animating it. Just allows you to be able to very quickly get a camera in there and get a sense of a move and some spatial, um, relational. Um, uh, what am I trying to say? Being able to understand where these things are going. Is there enough space? That's probably something you would do at the previous stage, really, at the very blocky stage rather than at this stage. But just to mention that was a good little trick. So cool. So yeah, just jumping back into the slides here. So yeah, upgrading it. You're obviously we already talked about it quite a bit, but you're trying to leverage as much as you can from the marketplace, from various different sources, from Quixel Megascans. As I said, there's tons of assets on there that are photo scanned. So really, yeah, take the biggest ones first. They're going to get the biggest bang for buck. Leverage what you can. You might need some environment art skills. You might need some artists at this point to make you custom stuff. Photogrammetry is your secret weapon. That is what made the Mandalorian look great. It's just made out of photographic stuff almost entirely. It's very hard to do that as an artist building something up from scratch. Much easier to do it photogrammetry, and actually a lot of people get in art department, build a physical thing, and then scan it and put it back in the virtual world. So yeah, photogrammetry as much as possible. Cool. So yeah, at this point you would do the shoot. And we already talked about this, but you being able to use a VCam, iPad, and Vive's a very great way of getting in cheaply and easily. The the idea of filming something at the same time, which I'm not going to go through here, but you can actually put a controller, like in this image here, you can put a controller or a tracker of some sort, whether it's as cheap and indie as a Vive or going up to the more high end ideas that some of them are listed here, things like Moses and Vicon, for being able to have be in a larger volume and track multiple types of things. Whatever it is that you're tracking, whether you just want a camera to shoot pure CG like I was, you may also want to shoot on top of a camera. You may want to do integration of some CG and live action, so you want to put some kind of tracker on the camera, and you can then feed the camera signal back through into the engine as well as feeding the tracking information. So then you get footage and the movement of the CG together, so you can then composite them together. And whether you choose that to happen in Unreal or in an external solution, is totally up to you. It is possible to do in Unreal. You also may be thinking at this point about getting people in mocap suits and doing action. And yeah, so some of those ideas are what you're going to be thinking about, whether it's full CG or live action integration. Composure is Unreal's first attempt at trying to composite in Unreal Engine. It's not bad, needs some work, but it is possible to composite in there. It's also possible to do it just with materials in Unreal Engine, but Composure is where you're going to be looking at hooking that up. Again, as I said, I'm not going to go through how that works in this webinar, but it's something which we do cover in our courses. So then we're moving into post-production. We're trying to get imagery out. We're talking about either getting the comped final of your live action integration or rendering out something from the engine. It is possible to do all of that process in engine, compositing and color correction, all that kind of stuff. Most people tend to prefer or try to comp and grade in some other solution, but at least probably the grading. Just give yourself the flexibility to change your mind with that. But yeah, movie render queue is the thing inside Unreal Engine. It's very simple to access. Just go to Windows Cinematics and movie render queue, which I guess is not on in this scene. Okay. Well, I'll go back to the slide. Just make sure that the plugin is on, and then you'll see the movie render queue option. Pop that up. You're going to be rendering a level sequence. So the thing that our take recorder just recorded was a level sequence that has your camera motion in it. One of those kinds of assets is what you're going to load into the movie render queue, and you're going to render that out. A little bit like After Effects kind of an idea. So it is ever evolving. You have to add all the options that you want in there. So adding your options for anti-aliasing and render quality and all of that good stuff. Once you've done that, you render out your image sequence, and you have your final. Or you're going to take that on into comp and or into a grading suite. Number of different things that you could do with it after that, but yeah, so now we're kind of through the idea of making a whole piece in Unreal Engine. So at this point, I want to go through a couple of slightly more advanced things in the way of lighting. I'm just going to load up a different scene for a second. So with this, I will be able to show you. Second. With this, I will be able to show you the levels. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to bring this back in. So a couple things I want to show you here. I'm just going to open up this little test scene. Sure, let's save all of that. Okay, so this little test scene right here, what I want to show you first is this idea of getting a proper base level for your lighting. So when you bring lights in to Unreal, they are normally 5 or 8 lux or whatever it is. That's not really realistic. In the real world, lights are much brighter than that. And you have in the engine, you have this kind of auto exposure compensation, which you can. It's great for games because you don't necessarily want people to control their own camera when they're playing a game. That'd be really frustrating. So it has this idea of being able to auto expose. So if I come down here to my I want to control it, take control of it. You want to put a post-process volume in here. So I'm going to be coming back to my place actors, grabbing a post-process volume, dragging it into the scene. This post-process volume, you want to make sure that its infinite extent is set on so that it controls the entire world. Otherwise, it will just be this little box here that's its volume. So make sure it's controlling the entire world. And then you can do all kinds of stuff in here. You can change color correction, all kinds of things. With this exposure mode, you can have this set to auto expose, which should use Unreal to regulate the exposure. I have this set to manual. What this basically does is mean that Unreal doesn't have control over it. I have control over it, and that means I can set it to manual. I can set the exposure compensation to 0, and then all my lights are going to behave properly. So now you can see this light here. I've got this directional light set to 10,000. If you create a scene, you're probably going to create one with an 8 lux in it. And that's kind of all right ish, but you're also going to watch the exposure go up and down in your scene, and you won't have control over that. It's going to do weird stuff that as a filmmaker you wouldn't want. So you want to set that in post-process to manual, and then set um, the lux to bring the light back up. Because when you do that, set it to manual and infinite, it will go black, and you'll freak out and say, "Ah, I broke my scene." But you haven't. You just need to bring your light back up again to make sure that it's lit properly. So now you've got your scene lit properly. Um, we've got this kind of base level of lighting, which is great. That's the right place to start. What I now want to show you, just going back to this for a second, is ray tracing. Just make sure you've got that on so you can benefit from all the nice effects of ray tracing, reflections, nice soft shadows, and that kind of thing. Got to make sure you've got the right hardware. Got to make sure you've got your project settings set correctly. Make sure that you so you have an RTX card, at least a 20 series. You want to make sure that your project settings, you're going to set ray tracing on, your default RHI to DirectX 12, and enable support compute skin cache. You'll have to restart at that point. But the best thing, what I recommend, usually you're going to want it probably in filmmaking. So just when you create a project, just set ray tracing to be on from the beginning. You won't have to keep restarting all the time. It's annoying. You have to wait and make sure it recompiles all of your shaders, and it's annoying. Nobody likes waiting. But there's a gotcha which I found a couple of times that drove me nuts for weeks. I just turned ray tracing on. It didn't seem like it was working, and I couldn't see this lovely path tracing option which I wanted. This which turns this into a full ray tracer. And I couldn't do GPU light mass baking, which is another cool thing that you can do to build your lighting to make it run really fast using the GPU, which builds it really fast as opposed to the CPU. And this was all grayed out, and this was not here. This path tracing was not here. So if you run into that problem, what's fixed it for me, and I thank the person whose name I can't remember, where I found this in the depths of the internet somewhere, delete your config folder. It will mean that you probably have to reset a few options, but that did enable, it did wake up ray tracing for me. So if you run into that problem, that's a really cool little top tip. So if you've got that set on, one awesome thing, which I want to show quickly, is RTXGI. You probably heard about Unreal 5 and its Nanite and its Lumen. Lumen is its kind of quasi real-time global illumination solution. There is something, as long as you've got an NVIDIA card and it's the right type, you can enable RTXGI. You have to install the plugin to make this happen, but it will make Unreal 4 behave like it's got a real-time GI solution that's much better than the ray trace one. You've got to install the plugin, so you can go to this link right here and follow the instructions. It's very simple. Just copy the plugin into the engine plugin folder. Go open Unreal, enable this plugin in plugins. You're then going to drag in an RTXGI volume. So The plugin is going to be right here. Turn on RTXGI. Okay, you want to enable this. It will make you restart it again, and then you're going to drag in RTXGI volume, drag that in, and scale it around. The one I've got in this scene is this box around this little house here. Not really a house, not a very good house anyway. But yeah, make sure that you're not using more of it than you need, I guess. So this little box around here is going to allow you to get this approximated GI solution, which runs really fast, which is great for real time. So once you've got that in your scene, you're then going to be looking at a few settings. Again, going back to here, you want to make sure that first that you enable these two console variables. So within this scene, I actually put them in the scene so I could remember in text. Very easy to set these on. You just hit the little tilde key and type in r.global, and then you'll see these little things pop up. You want this bottom one here, the experimental plugin, and type space 1 and at the end, and then hit that on. That is going to turn it on. You can see it just kind of popped on there. The other one I want to set on is r.rtx gi.ddgi space 1. Set that on as well. That's going to make it enabled. So now in this scene, you've got this pretty looking bounce light going on. You can see from this emissive material over here, from this shape here, this is actually bouncing light onto the wall. You can see that affecting the wall right there, which is amazing, I think. That's like you used to have to really, really fight for that in offline rendering, and it still mightn't be quite as high quality as that, but it's really pretty good. You can affect the quality of it by changing a couple of settings here. You can up the samples, the probe counts. This is all being computed from these probes, and you can see them if you want. You can turn on visualize probes. You can see what's where those light contribution samples are coming from. Make sure you set the probe max ray distance to something really high so that those probes can reach off into a giant scene and find something to hit to give them some kind of value. And then also this light multiplier, you need to crank this up. And because we set the light to be manual, you have to crank this up quite high. I should, at this point, credit William Foucher for creating a great tutorial on this very thing. And he points out this light multiplier, which in this instance, if you're using this kind of correct, like high light value, you're going to have to crank it up really high. In this case, it's up to 200. You'll find that if you use it in that way, you have to crank it up pretty high to be able to see it. If I just turn them off, you can see that the contribution of that GI kind of ramping up and down. So yeah, that's the light contribution, and then there's like an emissive contribution, which I think does the emissive property. Anyway, very cool. And if I just drop into play mode here, you can see on the side of this character here, it's pretty dark because this is all just being lit by the outside light. If I go beyond the threshold of this little box, I just step just inside of that box, you'll see him start to get maybe not. Maybe I turned off the light contribution. What did I do to it? Did I break it? All right, let's crank it back up to something nice like that. Now when I go in, you should see it. It'll pick up some of the light from the inside there. So within that volume, you should be picking up the bounce light. You can kind of see it now. So yeah, that's RTXGI. Another really cool little top tip is DLSS. This uses deep learning to upscale your image, so you only have to render a lower resolution, which is much faster. Once you have, you then upscale to get your higher res. And it uses deep learning, uses a neural net to upscale it. So this is pretty simple. Just install the plugin and enable the plugin and restart, like we said with RTXGI. And then in the viewport here, you'll see in the viewport settings, you will see, where is it? DLSS settings. So if I turn that off, you'll see my frame rate drop to something awful, like 10 frames per second. If I go back here again and go to performance, you'll see it jump back up to 20. So I got almost a double frame rate from doing that. There is there are different models in it, so choose, like with everything in life, performance versus quality, speed versus quality, I guess, visual quality. But yeah, that's something that can radically improve your frame rate. So really, really cool thing to enable if you've got NVIDIA hardware. Cool. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. That was our presentation on Unreal filmmaking. So what to do next? What would you do next? If you want to take this further, there are a number of things you can do. Grab some hardware that's capable of running Unreal, preferably something with a fast hard drive, decent amount of memory, like an NVMe drive with a couple of terabytes, 64 gig of RAM ideally, and a modern fast multi-core processor. I like the Threadrippers personally. You're going to download Unreal, which is free. You can learn the skills, which is also free. There's a ton of online learning from Epic's online learning course, which is amazing. There's so much stuff in there. Definitely recommend the first hour on Unreal. There's a tremendous amount of material in there. There's all kinds of groups on social media, Unreal Engine virtual production. We have a free Facebook group. You're welcome to join. Unreal Engine virtual production is an amazing, amazing resource. So 52,000 people in there, I think. Some incredible people in there. YouTube, obviously, lots of stuff on there. There's University, which is great, and then there's online schools, and yeah, lots and lots of options for what to do next. Obviously, great to explore all of those. Some of the big, I guess, challenges with getting the skills or improving your skills with the online free stuff. There's so much of it. When I started doing visual effects, there was almost no internet. Which I'm dating myself there, but there were a few books, so there was no overwhelm. It was just a few books to learn from, which was, it simplified it, but made it kind of more difficult. In this age, there's tons of stuff out there, and that's the challenge now, is sifting through it, making sure it's the right current information, that it's up to date. If you run into a problem with it, you don't have anyone to ask. You can try in the forums, but probably experienced that being challenging sometimes. Universities are fantastic. I went to one myself, but they do take a lot of time and can cost a lot. So yeah, that's definitely a great option if you don't want to take all that time and spend all of that money. I think one of the best options now is doing some online training, particularly from industry professionals. Now, sometimes universities will bring in industry professionals, but sometimes they don't as much, and they can be a little out of date. So I think these days, if you've got a little bit of money to spend, online training from industry pros is a great way to go. And shamelessly, this is the time for me to make good on my promise to present an offer to you, which is to come and study with us. We are CG Pro. We're an Unreal authorized training center. There's only 5 of those in the US. We are an authorized training center, authorized by Epic, which means we've gone through some testing and met the criteria that they require to be able to teach people Unreal. We have Unreal authorized instructors. I am an Unreal authorized instructor. So you'd be very, very welcome to come study with us. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we do right now. So we have a level 1 and a level 2. I'm just going to go through our level 1. Now, level 1, it's an 8-week course. Week 1, we go through what we just did and a whole lot more, and go into much, much more detail on that. Week 2, we go much deeper into workflows and organizational principles and environment layout and timelines, and how to really dig deep into some of the things that we just presented. Week 3, we go really deep into environments, finessing, talking about landscapes and foliage painting and bits of effects. And week 4, we go into deeper into lighting. I used to teach lighting, so I do my masterclass in lighting. We go into materials. And week 5, we're going deep into, this is animation week. We go really deep into animation and timelines, both making things move, characters and objects, and also the edit portion of Unreal, because you can actually do a rough edit in Unreal as well. So we go into that. Week 6, we go into deep into cameras and filmmaking principles. We go really into that process of setting up VCams in multiple ways. We go into blueprints, we go into composure, we go through virtual production, in-camera VFX at that point, or at least live action integration. And then we go through rendering principles, troubleshooting, optimizing, more into blueprints. Optimization is a hugely important area. As you saw, my frame rate there was terrible. So some obvious optimization to be done. That's something that you really, really need to focus on to make your scenes run fast, especially if you're going onto a wall or working in VR or whatever. Week 8, we do wrapping up your projects. We go through an individual project throughout this whole time. We guide you through it. There's 50 hours of live instruction and mentoring from myself, assistant instructor, and we bring in 4 guests as well. So you're all people that work live in the industry, who work actively in the industry, I should say. So it's a very rich experience. So that will take you from beginner or intermediate. We've had hundreds of students now, and people from filmmakers, visual effects people who have just started, people who have been doing it for a year or two, even do our level 1 class. It's a great way of getting a really solid foundation. I bring all of the things I've learned from running teams in The Lion King and Jungle Book and all of the other Unreal work that I've done in VR and all kinds of different places. So all the workflows that I've created and been a part of and learned from those environments just really, really bring it into this experience. Our advanced level 2 builds on top of that. So this is taught currently by Scott Rosekrantz, who's a virtual production supervisor at Zoic, and myself. So the 2 of us as instructors in there. We go through the set design in depth, how a proper studio goes about the process of constructing one of these experiences, scene setup, layout, lighting, and animation. Week 2, we're going through teamwork. We go deep into Perforce and remote session, doing how to organize the scenes, how to collaborate on them. Week 3, we go deep into green screens, composure, material keying, all the different ways of doing green work. Week 4, we focus on the LED work. We go through end display and camera tracking solutions, but we're really focusing on setup for LED. Week 5, we continue into that because there's a lot to be done there. We also bring guests into this one. We have guests that for our last one was a color expert, came in and did a whole masterclass just on color and different color spaces, and that was just fascinating. Go also into optimization in a more advanced sense in week 5. Week 6, we do the shoot. We simulate the shoot, do more things that help to support the shoot, like remote control and lighting control, how to properly integrate, how to capture light on a set and then use it back on itself. All the tips and tricks from the top, how to run virtual production shoots. And then week 7, we go through more in depth into animation, go through how to set up really advanced animation principles, animation blueprints and state machines, and we continue that into week 8 and go through control rig setup and more deeply into metahumans. So that is our level 2. So yeah, for level 1, you've got 8 weeks. It's 2 times a week outside of working hours, so you can do it with your job or other stuff you've got going on in your life. 50 hours of live instruction with us. The lead instructor is myself. We take our time, during those 50 hours. I've kind of whizzed through a lot here, but you really get the chance in that to like stop me and ask me questions. Jackie Cooper, who's been in the industry for 20 years, worked for some amazing studios like DD, MPC, ILM. She's co-instructor. We have bonus video content as well. All the previous masterclasses that we've done are all accessible. We have a project download. We have 3 or 4 guests come in and speak from industry on advanced topics. We have after support, so once you've graduated, we can help you if you want to get into an opportunity. We have some facilities to be able to help with that now for the right people. So yeah, we'll take care of you afterwards as well. We've got more options for things you can do afterwards. The cost currently for our level 1 is $2,997, and yeah, that is our level 1. So level 2, again, 8 weeks, very similar structure. Lead instructor is Scott Rosekrantz from Zoic. Co-instructor is myself. We also have the bonus video content. We've gone out and done a bunch of shoots. We are putting all of those into the course platform. We're going to go out and continue to do those. We're going to bring people onto those shoots if they're local, and continue to do that as long as COVID allows us to. But we have relationships with a lot of volumes, and we take people on there and give them some exposure to what that's like. But for people who can't, we've got the video, and we're going to keep adding that to stay current. All the previous masterclasses, as I said before, the project download, 3 or 4 guests from industry, the after support, and the cost for this one is the same price. But if you've done the level 1, we will discount to $2,497 if you take the level 1 as well. So yeah, that is just about all I've got for you guys today. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. If I can help in any way, I'm happy to. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to set up a call with me. We have a few spots left. There's only a few left for January. We've got our next one is January 16th. We have a few spots left for that. It's going almost full. Level 2, we are going to start late January. We have a few more spots available in level 2. So if you're interested in joining us for that, please feel free to reach out. It's a great way to do it is be in the Facebook group. We're always in there. You can communicate with us in there. Send us a message. We have a number of other ways for keeping in touch, in a free sense. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow our podcast, CG Pro Podcast, that's great as well. If you want to come and do this for 8 weeks and really dig into it and take your careers to the next level, jump on this crazy wave of virtual production that's happening. I think now is a fantastic time. I'm not just saying that. I think it is the most exciting time I've had in my career personally. There's so much innovation and so much excitement. It's really brought the backstage and the front of stage together. Being able to interact with these worlds is lots of fun, lots of work, but lots of fun. Anyway, it's a very exciting time. Unreal 5 is just around the corner. This is, it's just going to keep exploding, I think, as Unreal 5 comes out. So if you want to get ready, we can help. Let us know, and love to work with you. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.